Today we have a very special treat for all of us. Dr. Moshe Moeller in the house, couples therapist, and so much more. So please share a little bit with us. First of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is so cool.
How are you doing? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great. Feeling great. Yeah, really excited about this.
So tell us a little bit about the work that you do and your experience working with couples and in the field of mental health.
Sure. Okay. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I'm the associate program director for 2 grant-funded programs for Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. We have a program called Supporting Healthy Relationships, which is a couples program, and we have a program called Hero Dads, which is a fatherhood program. And both programs are free for these families. Generally, they're low-income families and working to improve their relationships, their finances, and general family stability. And so we have pretty robust programs to help them, fulfill their goals.
1 second. So you're saying people who are in relationships need help?
Yeah, isn't that surprising? Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, almost, conflict is inevitable in any relationships. And, people who tell me that, oh, no, we don't have any problems in the relationship. That's really a red flag because they obviously have some things that are not aligned, but they don't want to talk about it. We call those people either stonewallers or withdrawers. And they think that either, it's too scary to talk about, or I don't want to stir the pot, so I just won't talk about it. But what happens eventually, these things all come back in like full force, and it just explodes. And it's a really, really, terrible after that. So conflict's inevitable. And John Gottman, who's, one of the most famous researchers on couples and couples therapy, for 40 years, he's been researching this. He says that it's not about, conflict. It's not about, what you fight about. It's how you fight. And so that's the difference between masters of relationships and disasters of relationships. The masters, they know how to do it well. They're able to communicate in a healthy way. They're able to say what they want in, I feel statements, and they're able to express themselves and also listen to their partner. They're able to validate their partner, and they can, he calls, accepting influence from the other. Whereas disasters of relationships, they fall into this category of, they don't accept influence from their partner. They don't know how to validate. They're not great at getting their message across, and they're also not great at accepting the message and understanding what their partner is trying to say. And generally, those couples fall in, engage in what we call the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that John Gottman calls them, we call them in our program the 4 train wrecks. These are, number 1 is criticism. Number 2 is defensiveness. Number 3 is contempt or disrespect. And number 4 is stonewalling. And so those 4, we could talk about them each in detail. Those who engage in those types of communication styles are pretty much doomed to fail in their relationships. John Gottman said he could tell within the first 15 minutes of a conversation whether that relationship is going to fail or whether it's going to succeed.
Now, hearing this, for someone who had a challenging upbringing, that can be very difficult for a person to change that if that's something that they saw from their parents. So for someone who was raised in a home like that, where they saw, their mom using a very loud voice, screaming and yelling, or the dad being abusive, or vice versa, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Is there a way to change that pattern of behavior? Because a lot of the times when kids see certain behaviors from their parents, they kind of bring that into their relationships as adults.
Yes, of course, that is so common in the couples that we work with, but also in many couples. They've had childhoods or upbringings. Maybe there was trauma, or there was some type of abuse, or substance use, or neglect, or they didn't have enough money to get by, and all of that contributes to the environment in the home. And so the children are all impacted by that, whether directly or indirectly. And so the couple, the parents are also impacted by that, and that will then affect their relationship, right? So the stressors that come out that are not maybe directly related to the relationship, but outside stressors come into the relationship, and then it becomes an issue in the relationship. So then the kids see it. They think that their parents don't get along. They think their parents don't like each other, and they see unhealthy ways of communicating with each other. And yes, so then they may learn that's how you communicate, as adult, relationships.
So let's say a couple comes to you and says, this is what I saw in my life, right, growing up. As a therapist, what is your role to guide this couple?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, that's very common. I mean, most of the times, we do what we see, right? Modeling, right? So they don't know necessarily another way to engage in a relationship. So as a therapist, what we do is, first we need to really assess what's going on in the whole relationship. It's not just one part of the relationship that needs to, we need to focus on. We need to understand from the beginning how this relationship was formed, and then we also need to understand each partner's individual childhood histories, because that will inform how they're interacting with their current partner. And so we talk about attachment theory. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of times the way that we're brought up and the way that we engage with our parents, that sort of maps out how we will engage with other people in the future. So like the lens in which we see those relationships early on, we look through that same lens as adults. And so in therapy, we try to understand what that lens is. And if it's an unhealthy lens, we try to figure out how we can create a new one together with both partners.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify, if someone is listening to this podcast right now, and they might be in a tough spot in their relationship, to kind of take a look at their relationship with their parents and see what was that like growing up. Was the child more passive and wasn't able to make their needs known? Were they aggressive? Did they have a hard time managing the conflict and letting the parents know what they need and having a healthy way of communicating? So if you're listening to this podcast right now and possibly that's something that's been going on, based on what I'm hearing, you can make a change. You're not stuck. And oftentimes people feel because they lived a certain way for so many years, this is their destiny, but it's really not. In therapy, this is kind of where we learn to undo the stuff that was done or the stuff that we saw. So interestingly, what are some of the red flags that you see in couples where you feel like, okay, this is just not going to work?
Okay, so when we talk about red flags, I think about values and morals and beliefs. And so so many times when couples have conflict, it's not necessarily about what they're actually arguing about. It's not about whether we should, the small things, those nitty-gritty things. It's about what's underneath that, the values. So if couples are not aligned in, let's say, how they should spend their money, or how they should bring up their kids, or whether they want kids or not, those and in the beginning they see that that's somewhere where they disagree. That's a huge red flag, because if you're not going to be aligned in your values, then all the decisions that you make and all the behaviors that you do later on are based on those values. So then you're bound to reach to end up in conflict. So that's one major. So that's one major red flag. Another one is, if they're engaging in the four horsemen of the apocalypse, like we said. So number one, criticism. If you have a partner that is constantly criticizing, and what we mean by criticism, we're talking about statements like "you always" or "you never," like "you're always late," "you never clean up your room." So those, we're talking about the person's character as a whole, as opposed to a specific behavior or an action. And so what happens with criticism is, naturally, if I'm criticizing you, what's your natural instinct?
Defensiveness immediately.
There you go, defensiveness. And defensiveness is the second horseman of the second one. And that's, not taking responsibility or keeping score. I did this today, you did that, you do this tomorrow. That's defensiveness. And that's another train wreck or a horseman. And that's also a huge red flag. If someone is super defensive and can't own up or accept responsibility. And then another red flag is contempt. This is actually the worst one, where when one partner feels like they're above the other in some way, like it's not an even playing field, where someone feels superior to the other. And that could be in the form of eye rolling or sarcasm or insults, cursing. That is a huge red flag. And then lastly, stonewalling, which is when a partner would just shut down, isolate themselves, not talk, not engage. They may think that they're protecting the relationship, or it's just they don't want to gate and want to have anything to do with the other person right now. But that also breaks down communication. So that's another red flag if people are engaging in any of these. But the good news is, though, listeners out there, that even if you do engage in one of these behaviors, or if your partner does, you're able to change that. So sometimes, red flags are important to notice, but you can talk about it and communicate if you really want to work on this relationship. It depends how much you want it.
If both parties agree, correct?
Right.
Meaning if there's only, this is something I hear sometimes where, let's say a wife would say, I want to fix my relationship. My relationship is going downhill. It's just not working. I'm trying to bring my husband to therapy, but he doesn't want to come to therapy. Can this relationship still survive?
Yeah, so we can't force someone to change. And I've had a lot of experience where one partner wants to have therapy and the other partner does not, and it doesn't work. They both need to want to change. Many times we call them the pursuer in the relationship. A lot of times we have a pursuer in a relationship and a withdrawer. The pursuer in the relationship is always wanting to do stuff, planning things, working on the relationship. Let's do this. Come on. And the withdrawer pulls back. The stonewaller isolates, and there's like, no, that's not. I don't have time. Tomorrow, let's do this. Then tomorrow comes around, I have to work. And when I come home, then I just came home. So there's no time ever to talk about things. And the pursuer gets really annoyed and frustrated by this, and then they continue to pursue, and then the withdrawer continues to withdraw, and it's a negative cycle. It keeps on going. So yeah, that happens often. So if you're able to, with pursuers, if you feel like you're like this, you're nagging your partner, you may have to approach it in a different way. Obviously, the way that you're doing it now is not working. You have to switch it up. The way that you're saying it, the partner is withdrawing, and that means that something's happening inside that's really, really bothering him or her. So you need to talk about your feelings. I feel this, or I'm feeling very lonely here in the relationship. can we do something about it together?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I said that I was going to be your partner, I thought it was going to be different. Can we work together to make this different? As opposed to, you always doing this, you never want to work on the relationship. You don't care about my feelings. You never want to help out. What did you notice in the difference between those two ways of interacting?
So one is talking about her own feelings, and the
Right.
other one is just full on attacking.
Exactly. Like if you're talking about you, again, that's criticism. I'm gonna be defensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you start by saying, how it's impacting your own self, it's not putting blame on the other person. You're taking the responsibility yourself. That opens the door to change.
Mm-hmm. And this can be a skill also learned in therapy, talking about how you feel, because a lot of the times we're so conditioned to just focus on what the other person is not doing or doing,
Yeah.
and we don't actually stop and allow ourselves to be vulnerable and say like, hey, I'm not feeling okay right now. I'm not feeling like I have a partner who I can share with. I feel closed off because when I want to share, you're not home, and I would like for you to be home.
Yeah, vulnerability is a huge. I'm glad you use that word. It's such an important part in a relationship, because if you're not going to be vulnerable, you're not going to get anywhere. The problem is vulnerability requires taking that risk, and people are very scared to take that risk. Like if I share my deep feelings, what's going to happen? I don't know. Right? If I share that I feel really lonely, or I feel really sad about what just happened, or I feel really rejected or depressed, is my partner going to leave me? Will I be abandoned? Would they still like me? Will they think less of me? So many things that go through their head. And so therefore, we're going to put up a shell and pretend like we're totally fine. We'll be angry, and because that's safe to be angry, but we won't share our underlying feelings and to be vulnerable. And that thinking that we will stay connected. The problem is if we're not vulnerable, it actually moves us further apart.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerability pulls us closer.
Together.
Yeah.
Brene Brown talks a lot about vulnerability and actually how it comes from a place of strength, and it makes people closer, like you said. I noticed you mentioned something about people not wanting to stir the pot, right? If things look okay and if we're not yelling and killing each other, then everything is fine. Why do we have to talk about our feelings? And oftentimes people take on these characteristics of just letting things go, but keeping it inside and not vocalizing how they actually feel, because they think in Hebrew there's a term shalom bayit, right? Like, we want to have peace in the home. Keep the peace. Don't stir the pot. Keep the peace.
Right.
But in reality, this is a huge problem.
Right. Because it leads to resentment. The more that builds up, the more resentful you become. Now, I do want to say, though, I tell couples this all the time, that there are some things that are worth it and some things that are not worth it. Like, think to yourself, if you want to bring something up to your partner, is this something that you really want to work out together? Is this such a problem for you? Like, that your partner, I'm going to share something about my own personal relationship, so my wife, when she's done from work, she's done, she doesn't want to, she'll actually, I'm not going to share this because it's a little personal.
Okay.
But I do tell this to my couples, but my wife is probably going to listen to this. So she doesn't listen to my workshops.
Okay.
So I'm probably not going to share. But
look at you taking care of your wife like that.
I better, right?
Of course.
Basically, this is a situation where does it really matter to me that much? Should I really bring something up? Should I bring it up? And I'm like, no, I'll just deal with it, and that's okay. But I made that conscious decision to do that, not because that's how we deal with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife and I, we bring things up when we feel like it's an important thing that one of us really need to talk about, and it impacts us, and we're feeling, we're getting upset, or we're getting anxious, or we're getting annoyed with each other. So you have to pick your battles.
Mm-hmm. Don't you think after, and I'm just taking a guess here, but maybe after some time of letting things go and not bringing it up, even if it's the small things, not everything always has to. This is my thought. Not everything has to always be super important to bring up. Can that also build resentment, feeling like I'm constantly letting things go?
Yes, exactly. And so you have to know yourself. If you're coming to a point where things are, building up, you need to say something, and there are ways to say it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that people are either they don't know how to say it in the right way. They're worried that if I say something, I'm gonna hurt my partner, right? They're not gonna like me, or they're gonna think I'm annoying or nagging, or they're gonna leave me. So we have to know how to approach your partner in a way that they're gonna hear you, you're gonna be understood, and your needs are gonna be met.
Mm-hmm.
And we call that the softened startup, or Gottman calls that the softened startup. And that's where we spoke about, right? We talk about your feelings. Like I feel angry when the kids go to sleep late, or I feel concerned when the kids go to sleep at night. That's step number 1 of the softened startup. Step number 2 is stating what's wrong in neutral terms, like just putting out the facts. The facts are that tomorrow the kids have school and they have to get up early. So that's number 2. Then the third step is the need or the request in a polite way. In the future, if we're gonna, go out to eat, can we make sure we start earlier in the evening so that the kids can take their showers and go to sleep on time and still have a pleasant evening so they can get up on time tomorrow, right? So altogether, that would be, I'm really concerned about the kids going to sleep late. They have school tomorrow and they have to get up early. So in the future, if we're going to go out to eat, can we start earlier so then the whole bedtime process will be on time?
Right. So I want to give an example.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say there's a business and we hire a new employee.
Okay.
So we tell the employee, so for the first 2 weeks, depending, of course, on the place, sometimes it can be a month, sometimes it can be 3 months, you're going to be going through a training process. And we're going to guide you on how this system works, how this business works. In relationships, there's no 3-month process. It's something that's continuously ongoing until your last day on this earth, or I should say until the last day of this relationship, right?
Okay, yes.
Because oftentimes people think like, we've been living 50 years together, or we've been living, 30 years together, we're still at it, where there's still bickering going on. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts
on which part, the bickering, or that's still going? Like,
does the bickering ever end?
Oh yeah, that's like So for some couples, you see, no, it never ends. And sometimes they learn to tune each other out, and they're just used to it. But it's because they haven't focused on it. They haven't dealt with it early on, and so it just continues. And these are very, very easy things to deal with early on if you know how and if you have the tools to guide you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the training, like you're saying, right, for an employee, right? I mean, I wish that in high schools, they had a required class on relationships. Like they have so many other requirements, like economics or I don't know, AP, whatever, or these electives. I think it's really important to focus on relationships because that's something that you're going to need for the rest of your life. And that's something that is not taught. And as we said earlier, we don't always have the best role models in our homes. And so we don't know exactly how to do it right. But these things are able to be taught, they're able to be learned, and able to be mastered. And when we're able to really understand how relationships work and what to look out for and how to engage healthy, we can be really successful.
100%. Very well said. And now I want to share something personal.
Okay.
I remember when I got married. So, we have a part of our religious custom. We get married, and then for 7 days, we celebrate every night the Sheva Brachos, right?
Yeah.
So on one of those celebrations, somebody got up, like an older person, like one of the great grandparents, grandparents, like one of those great uncles.
Yes.
And they said, "That's it. You got married. Your life is out the window. You are for her, and he is for you, and this is now you are for each other. You complete each other, and that's it." And then, during that time, I was becoming a therapist, and when I heard that, I'm like, interesting. And I actually noticed this trend that they get up on during these events, and they say these things, and that's it. Like, you are for him, and he is for you, and that's it. And as a therapist, I thought for a moment, I said, absolutely not. In relationships, and I mention this a lot of the times to my clients, in relationships, there are three entities: the husband, the wife, and the couple. Oftentimes, people feel like if they're in a relationship, their identity does not matter. And that's where resentment gets built. Because when you invest into something so much and forget about yourself, that's when you get really disappointed when they don't see your values.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How...
Well, could I first talk about the Sheva Brachos thing?
Sure.
Because, these are the 7 days after the wedding where we have little get-togethers or parties and people speak. And many times, they may give toasts to the bride or groom, but also they like to impart their wisdom to the young married couple,
Yep.
right? And as a couples therapist, when you hear some of the things that people say, it's quite hilarious. And I love it's like these people, they know, they're experts because they've been married for 50 years or whatever. So they know everything.
Right.
With all couples. And things that we did is going to work for you. And it's so funny. And it's and usually the groom and the bride are not really listening to anything anyways. Maybe they are. But I just find it very funny that everyone has their expert advice in couples.
And oftentimes they come from a good place.
Of course. They love the bride and groom.
Yeah, they want things to work, but oftentimes, they're holding on to so much that's unresolved. And oftentimes in those families, they're still at it. They're still bickering going on.
Like something like giving, right? That's a good example of like, what's going to be the secret to your relationship? Just keep on giving. Giving is a really important part of a relationship. We talk about that, and the Hebrew word for give is hav, right? And like the Hebrew word for love is ava, right? And so that's the more you give, the more you love, right? Because you're investing in that person or that thing. But the thing is, if someone gives, and they lose themselves, right? So you can't just give. There needs to be a balance. And just to come back to what you were saying earlier of losing yourself, and it's not about your whole life is lost now that you're in a relationship with someone else. I like to show couples that you have, you're basically two circles. It's like a Venn diagram, right? So in the middle, we have the couple relationship, but you still have your own identities in your own circles. And it's important to still invest in those parts of yourself, right? You want to focus on your hobbies or your interests or your desire, or, if you're interested in animals, right? To keep on nurturing that. You're interested in, I'm interested in piano playing, right? So I'll nurture that. Of course, we want to be respectful and honor each other's individualized needs, but not everything has to be together. Not everything has to be. Mm-hmm. You don't have to love everything that your partner's interested in. It's about loving your partner because of whatever they are interested in. It's not about loving the things they are interested in. It's about being interested in the things that your partner loves because you love them.
Mm-hmm. Fun fact, you ready for this?
Yes.
Interesting. We're talking about couples today. I did not think I was going to share all of this about my own stuff, but
you're in your own couples therapy here.
But here we go. So for those who follow me on social media and
I do
see my work, you obviously see that I have a lot of different animals. Animals that, as I'm talking, we have a tarantula right over here.
It's in the cage.
And Sophie, the therapy dog, is outside of the podcast room. But I have a lot of animals. I live with a horse. I have a snake. I have so much going on in my house. And the number one question I get asked, I don't think I ever share this, but the number one question I get asked when I walk the streets, on social media, every time I get a new animal is, what does your wife say about this? Oh. Every single time. Wow. And sometimes people even say, what would you do if your wife wouldn't let you have all of these animals? Fun fact, my wife was actually petrified of dogs.
Really?
Really. When we got married, it's interesting because I was a huge animal lover always. And when I met my wife, we dated for such a short period of time, we got married. And before I even got to tell her, I love animals and want to, this was, by the way, never my dream to have. It was my dream, but it was so far-fetched. I never thought I would actually be where I am.
Right. So before you got engaged, she didn't know that you're an animal lover?
She knew that I liked animals, but never thought she would be.
You would have she would be a zookeeper.
Never.
Right, okay.
Never. It was never something that crossed her mind.
Okay.
And when we got married, I said to her, I would love to get a dog. And she said, haha, that's cute.
Oh, you didn't have any before you got married?
No, I never. Wow. It's interesting because growing up, maybe I'm overcompensating because growing up,
you always wanted.
I always wanted a dog.
Yeah.
And my mom said, sure, no problem. When you get married, you'll get a dog.
There you go.
So I only basically had a goldfish. So now I guess I'm overcompensating for all the animals I didn't have.
Sure.
So when I got married and I told my wife I would like to get a dog, she was like, very funny. I'm petrified of dogs.
Wow.
So at that moment, she could have said, I'm afraid of dogs. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And that's the end of that. Which, by the way, for many couples, that's the case. Because as a therapist and as an animal lover, oftentimes either the husbands will come to me or the wife will come to me and they'll say, I really want to get a dog, but my wife, or a cat, but my wife or my husband doesn't want it. What should I do? How can I get them on board, right? So obviously, I never bring in my own personal stuff. I'm just sharing this here with you because we're in a safe space, right? Mm-hmm. No one else is watching us.
Yeah.
But it was at that point where she knew how much it meant to me. And she said, I'm going to allow myself to be uncomfortable, overcome my fear of dogs.
Wow.
And this was just with one dog, with Sophie, my golden retriever, right? Long story short, now we live in a zoo. So when people ask me, would you marry someone if she would say, she's not going to allow this? So we were in a place where she knew how much it meant for me. And she said, I'm going to allow myself to be curious. And because she was curious, it got her to a place where she absolutely loves, I should say, most of the animals. Okay. She doesn't really love the cockroaches or the reptiles as much as she loves the dogs or the parrots or the horse. But But what I'm just trying to show here is allowing yourself to become curious,
Yeah.
even though something can make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I mean, kudos to her
I know,
for jumping in and really participating and being such a great sport. I mean, knowing, yes, all your animals. I mean, but that shows commitment. That shows how she's encouraging you to, keep your wants and your needs and your ambitions. She wants you to grow in your in the things that you want.
For sure.
Mhm.
I mean, thanks for saying that. What I want to mention also, though, is because she allowed it, well, or I should say, because she was flexible
Mhm.
in allowing it, I also made sure to respect her boundaries, which means if we have to go away on vacation, I will do everything possible to make it work. I will never use the animals as an excuse to say, oh, I can't go because I have all these animals. Or, for example, cleaning up the house. I make sure she does not have to clean up after the animals.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And so if we want to generalize this to other things in couples work, what you did was negotiation and compromise, good problem solving. So many times, we do have conflict in relationships. Just so everyone knows, 69% of conflict in relationships can't really be solved. That's what Gottman says, but all the rest can. So let's focus on the 31, right? But what we're talking about is you had a problem and you tried to figure out a solution together where both of you felt like your needs were being met. Like if you would have just went ahead with all the animals, right, and not cared about what she wanted or what she knew was important to her, then that wouldn't have been negotiation. That would have been she was giving in. But here, when you accept what the idea is, you're understanding her needs and she understands your needs, and together you're coming to a place of mutual agreement. So many times, a good example is, where are we going to go for a Shabbos, right? So Sabbath, or like a holiday, right?
Or we'll simplify that. What are we having for dinner?
What are we doing? Right. Okay. Right.
Where are we going out?
Right.
Dairy or meat?
Yeah. So if we, there are ways to get to a healthy resolution if we're able to, number one, understand what it is that we're fighting about. What is it that we're trying to solve? Number two is, what are the things that we agree upon here? What are the values? Why is it so important to us that we do this or do that, right? So if she would have to understand, why is it so important for you to your animals, right? Why is it so important to her to take vacations or whatever, right? And many times you agree on certain things. Like you probably agree that, self-care is important, right? And that's one of the things. So if we're able to find ways in which we agree, then we're able to get to a good solution together. The next thing is brainstorming solutions. So so many times couples fall short is when one partner comes up with a solution before they even had a discussion about it. And then it's like, no, you decided it. It wasn't a mutual, agreement. So you brainstorm a bunch of different solutions, no judgment, and then you pick one, see if it works. If it doesn't, you try another one, and see how it goes. But a large part of it is what we're talking about is understanding where your partner's coming from and what they value.
So talking about values, oftentimes we share our values through communication.
Right.
Right. We talk about the top 3 challenges that couples face. What would they be for you? Or would you say the top 3 or top 4?
Top 4. So top 4 challenges. We have children. We have sex, finances, and in-laws, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the first one.
Okay.
Children.
Yes. So, whether it's parenting styles, whether it's, different personalities of children or temperaments of children, how to deal with it, Sometimes you have kids like, oh, mommy's not going to give me candy, but if I go to daddy or Abba, I'll get the candy, so I'll know where to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not being on the same page about things, that's huge. But understanding parenting styles is really important. Something that actually, I don't have to talk about parenting because I think that was last or one of the other topics. So children is a big one. Every day we have to take care of our kids.
Yeah.
There are no breaks.
Especially if, for example, you have, say, I don't want to be super cliche, but I'm just going to give an example. Let's say you have a mom who wants to talk to the child and use some therapeutic skills, and then where you have a dad where it's like tough love. You don't listen. You're gonna, put on your shoes, or you're gonna get a smack. Get into the car.
Right.
And sometimes it's really challenging where one of the partners will use an old school type of discipline and technique, and then the other one will try to figure out a different way. And then how do you bring that in together? So as a couples therapist, do you feel like you see that in your practice?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And how do you navigate something like that? Without the father feeling like you're taking sides.
Father or the mother, right?
Or the mother.
It could be.
Right. Well, I'm saying for the example that I shared.
Right. Without taking sides. That's very important because couples therapy, you have to be neutral and you're not on anyone's side, because if you are, it'll fail.
This is something that I hear pretty often. People who are contemplating to go into couples therapy, and they feel like, oh, if it's a she, she's going to pick sides. If it's a he's going to pick sides.
Right.
And it's not about that.
Right. If you feel ever point you do feel like that, talk to your therapist about that and express that.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it. Getting back to the example, right? So it's about helping them understand the impact of whatever it is that they're doing, right? So, and that's when you may want to bring in, it depends what type of person you're dealing with. If it's someone who's very intellectualized, you may want to bring in some research and data to back you up. It's like, the data says that the more the more together, like the balance of warmth and strictness, or the balance of warmth and rules and consequences together, the more that you have of both, the better success you'll have with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just have one or the other, you won't have such great success. So how can we together combine both of them? So it's helping them understand and becoming aware of what their actions are doing. Like, is if you're gonna yell, is it because you're very frustrated in what's going on right now, right? It probably is, right? You're getting angry because they're not listening to you the first time. But how will that impact the child? Will they be afraid of you? Is that what you want your child to feel? Mm-hmm. Or do you want your child to feel, close to you, right? But they never listen. Well, maybe you have to do it in a different way. It doesn't have to be yelling. Mm-hmm. One thing I do want to say for the parents, I know we're not doing parenting, but I just want to say that parents have a very, very hard job. And there's no perfect parent. And we're trying to be good enough parents. And that's what we can strive for. Because I've had my bad days. In the supermarket, you see people can judge people, right? Because they're screaming at their kid. You don't know what her day or his day was like. Mm. You never know. So we try to be the best parents that we can be.
Yeah. I know part of your work, you also work with dads.
Yeah. A large
part of that. So especially for couples who went through a divorce and are now co-parenting, you see some of those dads in your practice.
Yeah.
For a father or a mother who's listening to this right now and is parenting their children by themselves, and also in a relationship where they're doing this by themselves, what are some words of encouragement that you can share?
Well, first of all, just to parenting with a partner is tough, but being a single parent is really, really tough, especially if you're working
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you have a full-time job and you're working, I mean, and you have to be a parent, that's a lot. So to be able to have the strength and determination, you get a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
But I think when parents get divorced, that's when the struggle with the children become even greater, because they're not in the same household. They generally are fighting about what's right and wrong. And if mom said one thing, dad will say, "Oh, I have to say the opposite." Or if dad said one thing, oh, mom will say the opposite. Or they try to try to influence the kid to make the kid like them better.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the person that suffers the most is the child or the
Yeah.
children. So it really comes down to how willing the parents are to make this as best experience for the child as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because, are they putting the child first, or are they putting their own needs beforehand, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, is it a monetary thing? Is it, the partner did this to me? The partner sued me for whatever, all these legal fees now, or I have, they promised one thing and now it's something totally different. Is that going to impact the way that you're
Right.
parenting the child? And sometimes what happens with divorce is that their values are not aligned. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore they're separating. If their values are not aligned, so then they're going to have an issue with how their co-parent is parenting the child many times. Because let's say, for example, let's take religiosity for an example. If one parent wants to be more religious and the other one parent wants to be less religious, that's going to impact the child, because now the child maybe will go to synagogue on Shabbat, and if the other partner, the co-parent, they won't. And the one that wants them to go will have a really hard time when they're not going at the co-parent's house, right? So that'll cause, again, but then who gets impacted? It's the child, because the child hears this like, oh, mommy wants me to go to synagogue, but daddy doesn't let me, right? So like, I want to go, but I can't, or like I should go, or maybe I shouldn't go. It's very confusing for them. So I think that we need to try to be on the same page as much as possible. What we do with co-parents, we try to have a co-parenting plan, and that is basically a contract between both co-parents outlining how they're going to be parenting this child and how you can find areas of agreement, like we did before with, we talked about before, negotiation and compromise,
Mm-hmm.
to really figure out how the child is going to be successful. It's very, very tough.
But it is possible.
It's possible, but
Right.
it's tough.
So going back to the couples, the challenges
Yes.
in couples. So we talk about kids. Let's talk a
Sex.
let's talk about, a little bit about sex. Yes.
Yes, a little bit about sex, a lot
Yeah.
about sex.
Sure.
I mean, right? As a couples therapist, you have to be very comfortable talking about sex. Otherwise, you really can't be a couples therapist. So, sex has so many layers to it in all different ways. Ranging, because if coming from maybe like a Orthodox Jewish culture where sex maybe was not talked about at all, there probably wasn't sex education growing up, and engaging with people of the opposite sex, maybe opposite gender, was frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many misconceptions and expectations and confusion when they're finally able to have a sexual relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when it comes down to the conflict with sex, it comes down to frequency. When one partner wants more frequent than the other, you know what type of sex they're going to engage in, and the comfortability that each of them have, and then there's always issues regarding sexual health and abilities to engage in a sexual relationship, different sexual disorders. So combining all those things, there can be a host of conflicts that come up. The idea is to be able to have conversations with your partner, not during the sexual event or experience, whenever you're engaging in sex, because that's not a good time to talk about it. Talk about it when you have time, the kids aren't around, and you're able to discuss openly and be vulnerable. That's the key point. This is like the ultimate vulnerability here, of what you want and what you need in the sexual relationship, and being able to identify what feels good and what may not feel so good, and how can we have more of what feels good. And some people have past sexual trauma. They've had things that have been not been spoken about, or they may have repressed those feelings or those memories. And now when they're in finally in a real sexual relationship, all these things come back to them, flooding back, and they've had, PTSD. And then they can't engage. They can't have someone touch them because they're remembering all these things from the past. So in those situations, you do need to seek help. You need to seek help of a therapist to help guide them through. And there are ways to do that. We call it sensate-focused therapy, which is a gradual process to become more comfortable with it when both partners are ready. But yeah, that is another big topic that couples argue about. And so if you're one of those couples, you're not alone.
Could we talk a little bit about the shame that's attached to it?
Oh, sure. I mean, so there's shame in different levels. So number one, there's shame where some couples feel like they need to have kids right away, or they have to have a certain amount of kids. And if some of their friends are getting pregnant, or they know their family members are, or there's expectations, and they're not, either because of their choice or because they're not able to, they can feel really lonely, and they can sometimes feel shame as well. Shame can also come into the story, yes, when there's a past trauma with sexual experiences. So they can feel shame about what was done in the past. They can feel like they were responsible for whatever was done, even though they were probably, too young, or, not consensual. So they can feel shame. The shame can come back from the past they're feeling now. Shame also with not being able to provide for the partner as their partner wants. Like maybe they're not attractive enough to their partner, or they feel like they're not comfortable enough with their own bodies, and so therefore they're ashamed of how to express themselves. They don't know how to also, right? So these are all very common experiences. And the thing that happens, though, they may not talk about it. They probably won't talk about it. And so then sex becomes more infrequent, and becomes more of a chore, and becomes more of something like we don't want to do really, but we have to, or we should. And so that's when you really need to speak to someone about it to work it out.
So, talking about sex, I have a hot topic for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So, is a cheater always a cheater?
Oh, wow. Is a cheater always a cheater? Well, so delve more into that question. What do you mean? We're talking about infidelity, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So what is, yeah.
For someone who has cheated on their partner, and this can be used for any circumstance. In a relationship, cheated on the partner, should the partner take them back? Now, wants to be in a new relationship. This new person finds out he cheated on his or she cheated. By the way, it can go both ways. Should they get into a relationship like that because this person was known to cheat? Can a person fix their ways, or is a cheater always going to be a cheater?
So we're talking about someone who cheated in a previous relationship and now they're in a new one. Not the same. Oh,
either
one. Okay.
or. Well, let's talk
Right.
about the same first.
Same. Yeah. So there are always ways to re-engage and to establish the relationship again, if both partners are willing to. It can take time, because what happens with infidelity and cheating is that trust is broken. And it's very easy to lose trust. It's very difficult to gain it back, or to gain in the first place. And so when someone finds out that they've been cheated on, they feel betrayed, and it's a real trauma. Research calls it a real trauma that happens because your whole world is sort of flipped upside down and taken by this immense amount of shock. And when that happens, they will be so mistrusting, is that the word? Distrusting?
We'll make it a word.
Okay. Of their partner moving forward. They'll want to know who they're texting, who they're seeing, who they're calling, where are they, what are they doing. It really becomes so difficult for both of them, because one partner feels like they've been betrayed and cheated on, so therefore it's their right to know exactly what's going on, and the other partner may feel remorse, may feel really bad. I think it could only work if the partner does feel bad, regrets what they've done, and commits to not do it again. Otherwise, it can't really work out. But they're going through all their host of feelings as well. Why did this person feel like they needed to cheat in the first place? Was there something missing? Right, and so the partner who was cheated on, what didn't I have that this other person has, or that gave the excuse or the reason for my partner to go cheat?
And sometimes it's not about that. It's not about that one partner didn't have something that the other partner wanted, right?
Right. Exactly. And so all these feelings together can really, really throws the relationship, into like this whirlwind. But if they're able to get a couples therapist who knows how to work with infidelity, they are able to create a new relationship. It's not going to be the same as before, but it could even be stronger than it was before. It has the potential if both partners are willing. It usually takes at least a year or so for some good significant change to happen. But it is possible. Now, that's if it's in the current relationship. If there's evidence that there was cheating in the past, will they in past relationship, will they cheat again in this relationship? Well, I worked with a lot of couples actually that they've met by having an affair, right? And so therefore they start off the relationship, both of them, maybe they cheated on their partners and now they're together. So now they are suspicious of their partners cheating because they did it already before. So maybe they're doing it again now, right? That becomes very tricky. But I wouldn't say there's an overall yes or no to always being a cheater. If there's any evidence one way or the other, I think it depends on how committed they are. committed they are in the relationship and how committed they are to change and work through this.
So I noticed you said this is going to be a new relationship and it's not the old relationship.
Yeah, this is not, it's never going to go back to what it was before in a case of infidelity. It's not. It can't be. I think this is what, not Brene Brown, the other, what's her name with the ex? She's like from Europe.
Oh, yes, I know who you're talking about. I know who
Wow.
you're talking about, yes.
She talks about infidelity all the
Yeah.
time. Well, what's her name? Oh, no. I see her Instagram. I mean, she always comes up on ads and
Yeah,
stuff.
let me
She has
find it.
like a master class or
Yeah,
whatever.
she did something with Jay Shetty.
Oh my God.
Let's
I
see.
mean, her
Let's
face
see.
is in my. She has a game. She has like a couples game now.
Is it that one?
It's gonna be very embarrassing. No.
Yeah, her name is Esther Pearl.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Esther Pearl.
Esther Pearl. All right.
So she says that. Yeah, she says that there's no. I think everyone begins. Everyone's going to be in many relationships with their. With a significant other, and she says many times it's the same person, but it's many types of relationships, and because when a betrayal happens in a relationship, it really it's like a break in all the things that you've built up, and then when you start over or when you continue, it's really a starting over because you need to rebuild so many of the things that have fallen down and crashed.
So in a situation where a spouse has cheated,
Yes.
there is a way to make things work going forward, because oftentimes people hear
That's done.
that if this happened, that's it, it's over. But there is, or if they take back their partner, they feel like they can no longer trust this person ever again.
Right.
But actually, even though trust was broken, trust can also be rebuilt.
It can, but it'll be rebuilt in a series of steps and in a way that they both agree upon. Now, like it could be, building up to, maybe they need to have access to their phone records or their, where their location or something like that. But and the person needs to acquiesce, but eventually they have to graduate from that also, because then it'll just feel very stifling and not being able to have any freedom. It's a very delicate balance because yes, this one person cheated, and so the other person feels like they have all the power now. But it's very complicated.
So I'll give you an example. I was doing some work. I'm not going to name, obviously any names, no identifying information.
Right.
We take confidentiality very seriously here. But I was doing some work with an individual, and the individual cheated on their spouse. And
so this wasn't couples; it was individual.
This
therapy.
was an individual therapy, right?
Okay.
This was individual therapy, and the spouse cheated on their, on their partner. And I said, in order to be able to make this relationship work, if in the past your spouse didn't really message you throughout the day, didn't really call you throughout the day, and now this spouse is going to do that, it's important for you to pick up every single call. Even if it's 3, 4, 5 calls, you have to pick up the call. Or if you're in a meeting, to say, hey, I'm going to the meeting this time, I'll be out this time, I'll check in with you when I come out, especially in the beginning phase, because it's such a crucial period for you to be able to rebuild this relationship.
Yeah.
And also, this is your work too, because your spouse has to do a lot of work to be able to rebuild this relationship. So by you picking up the phone, and it might make you feel uncomfortable, like, why are you checking in on me? But this is your now responsibility.
Yeah.
To rebuild this relationship.
Exactly. Yes. Totally. You really need to respond. You're the one that caused us to get here, to come back to, to zero. We got to build it up.
With that said, I like what you mentioned about the graduating phase, because there has to come a time for every person, it's different how much time.
Yeah.
But there has to come a time where you'll start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is that trust rebuilding again. And if you feel like you don't see it, then that's where the communication comes in. Like, look, for the past 4 or 5 months, I've been picking up every phone call. I've been coming, home for dinner every time when, when I was supposed to come. I didn't come late. I'm checking in with you. How can we kind of take a couple of steps back and then talk about it? It's that openness that's very important.
Yeah.
So talking about the next category, which is finances.
Yeah. Did we cover all others? I think there was one thing I wanted to say.
Communication.
Oh, just about I will get to find it, but infidelity, cheating. I just wanted to mention that it's not always necessarily cheating, like with a physical person, that may cause a rupture, like of such a, such an extent. Sometimes it's a partner finding out, let's say their partner had a substance use issue, or like they're using drugs, right? Alcohol or gambling or something that they didn't know anything about. And then they find out, or like, because maybe they're in like a huge amount of debt now. They're like, how did this happen? That can also feel very similar, It's not the same thing like cheating on another person, but it's also a breakdown of trust. And again, the trust now needs to be rebuilt if we're going to move ahead in the relationship.
I think that's such an important point because unfortunately there's so much shame attached to that, especially when one of the partners has to appear to be, having it all together, being strong, and then something like this comes up, and then talking about a whirlwind, this can be turn this couple upside down. Exactly,
Yeah.
Absolutely. So going now, what a segue, going to finances.
Yeah. Again, another huge conflictual topic in relationships. I mean, huge. Wow, I didn't even know where to start because there's so many things with finances. So,
let's talk about bank accounts.
Oh yeah, that came to mind. Yeah, bank accounts, right?
One or two
separate bank accounts,
or three,
right? So, the research shows that couples who have a joint bank account are more satisfied in their relationship than those who have separate ones. Just putting that out there. Not saying that you should do it or whatever. Just want to put that out there. My wife and I have a joint bank account. Okay.
Wait, but I'm actually glad you're bringing that up. Can I share something?
Yeah.
All right. When we got married, we thought that was the right thing to do. This is what we have to do. So we, like the first week of being married, we went to the bank. And I have to mention, my wife is an accountant. So she kind of, manages all the finances.
Right.
So I remember when we got married, the first week, we went to the bank and we said, we're going to open up a bank account. And we did. And when I was working for a company, my check came into the bank account. She was working, and her check came in, and she took care of all the finances, the mortgage, the car payments, the house bills, all of that. And every time I wanted to make a purchase, I would have to call her and say, like, hey, I want to make a purchase. Not for something small, obviously, but if it was a bigger purchase, right? Hey, I wanted to. Right. I had to call and say, hey, can I, not for permission, but just to make sure if she has, a calculation where she's sending out the money here, she's sending out the money there, just to make sure, there's not going to be any issue there. And after some time, I kind of said, hey, let's readjust, because I also need to feel like I can go and spend and do whatever I need to do without having to call to make sure, whether the finances are there, like everything's in check. And that's what I did. So now we have our account. She doesn't have her account. She just our account is her account, and then I have my account with whatever I need to do, whether it's really buying the animal supplies or buying any other stuff that I need for my entity. I buy it through there, and then we obviously have the family account. And what I want to mention is this works great for us. And this is what it's about. There's not, and I love that you shared, what works for you. But if something keeps working and there's no conflict, then you can go with it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it needs to come with a conversation and an understanding of what that means for everyone involved. It can get very sticky. So right? The way that sounds like the way that you have it set up, you have a joint account and then you have a separate account, but your wife does not have a separate.
Well, I don't really touch the joint account, so that's like kind of the family account and her account.
Okay, because she deals with all the bills.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Exactly. So whatever she needs, she gets from that account.
Right. Let me just tell you what some couples do. Some couples have both partners have their own account, and they have a joint account, and so that every month they put in a certain amount into that joint account, and in that joint account is where they pay all their bills they have to do together. Right. Anything that they have left over in their own account, they can do whatever they want with it.
Right.
Right. So, but then some people have different. It depends also how much money each partner makes. If one partner makes $200,000 a year and the other partner makes $100,000 a year, are they both putting in the same amount of money or not?
Right.
And so usually it's by percentage. They should put in however percent, how much they make should go into that joint account, and so that everything, it feels more equal. Now, some couples do it differently. Some couples, right, maybe have two separate accounts. They don't have a joint account. And by the way, for that way, there are like apps that you can do. It's very easy to manage those types of things. Then there are couples that have two separate accounts, and that one partner pays for some of the bills, and the other partner pays for this thing and that thing, and whatever. They try to divide it up in some way, but then it doesn't always feel so fair. There are couples have joint account. And that's it. That's how I do it with my wife. And basically, our philosophy is we're a family, and so we just put everything all together, no matter what, and whatever the family, whatever we need for kids or us or whatever, it's just all together.
So how does it work? Like, let's say you want to
right. So it's
get her a nice big gift, right?
So if I want to get her, so usually, we don't usually get huge gifts for each other. So, we will. It's a conversation, obviously. Usually, it's one of us wants to get the other part. Our part.
So if you want to get her a gift,
right? So,
she's gonna see it.
You'd have to. Oh, right. So she'll definitely see, and that's also important with finances. Is that to be transparent about things, because that could also cause suspicion when you're not open about the money coming in and the money going out. Like, where's the money going?
Right. I know that. I hear transparency is very important, 100%. But also at the same time, I don't think every single thing has to be told to your spouse and vice versa.
Right. And so we don't really and both of us, we have access to all the accounts, and we can look at it on our phones. And if there's a thing in question, usually my wife circles it and sends it to me. I mean, actually, goes both ways. We look at stuff like one time I saw, for payments to DraftKings. I don't know if you have DraftKings. It's a gambling thing. And
do you want to tell me something?
We realized that our credit card was stolen, right? So we just got a new number. But like you have to keep on, make sure you're on it, and then ask each other what's going on. So, but sometimes couples, one partner is very clueless about finances, and they don't want to deal with it, and they prefer their partner does everything, and they're okay with that. There's one thing there's another thing I want to mention is, let's say one partner doesn't work and the other partner works, right? Does the partner who doesn't work have any say in financial decisions in the family, right? Or do they have like a budget or an allowance or something like that, right? This is where financial abuse can come into play. Like we talk about like domestic violence, right? There's a lot of like finances is included in that, where a partner doesn't have the freedom or the ability to spend money as they would like to. And when we restrict someone's ability to spend money, that causes significant power imbalance in the relationship. And so there's something about, there's something about your partner that it doesn't feel equal anymore. Now, why is the partner not working? There could be 100 different things why they're not working. But I think we're talking about in a general family, the reason many times why one partner doesn't work is because they're taking care of the kids at home, usually in a traditional family. Nowadays, almost every family need to have
or
dual
in
incomes.
school, or
Right, or they're in school or something, right? I mean, I was in school for many years, and my wife was the one that was working, and the money was all together, even though I wasn't making the money. So we need to be. I think it happens in the Orthodox Jewish community. It happens a lot more where the male is making the money and in control of the finances, and the female may not have a say or may not have as much of a say as they would like to in the finances.
unless she's an accountant.
Unless she's an accountant, right? Then it could be different. Then it could be the opposite. But so however it is, just to keep that in mind, that we don't want to make our partner feel like they are stuck or they are, not allowed to spend any money. Now, sometimes I think it can happen where a partner doesn't know how to spend money correctly. Like maybe they overspend and they don't know how much money's coming in and how much money's going out. That's maybe when you want to, again, have a conversation or talk to a financial advisor or something to understand what it is, and also about establishing a budget. So many couples I don't know if they have this, but we talk with a lot of our couples, we help them establish budgets to see, what money's coming in and what money's going out, and to be on the same page about that. So if we know that we can spend, this month $1,000 on clothing, let's just say, so we know that's what we can do. But if it's set up in the beginning, and then everyone is on the same page, then you don't have so much conflict when things, when there are surprises or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking of different scenarios that come up, but even personality types. If she'll go shopping, she'll buy 3 tomatoes. If he'll go shopping, he'll come home with 12 tomatoes, or vice versa. So it's talking about finances and budgeting, and if she's in school or he doesn't work, for these types of circumstances, the allowance piece, that's a very interesting point. That has to be worked out and discussed.
Yeah. I mean, partners shouldn't feel like children, right? Like children have allowances, but partners need to feel like they're an equal in this relationship.
What are your thoughts about a 50-50 relationship?
Like of money, of spending, or what? 50,
sure,
50 what?
Spending,
but
just
in general.
Do you?
So
what are your thoughts
comes,
about that statement?
Yeah, so this is a great topic. We need to talk about gender roles if we're going to talk about this, and the current state of society, where we are in society nowadays. It's very different from how we were 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I think we have a lot of, Orthodox Jewish listeners here, and, maybe our parents or our grandparents came from those times where things were a little bit more traditional, and where men were the primary breadwinners, and women were the ones to stay at home and help and,
take care of the
kids and whatever household domestic needs that need to be done. Nowadays, it's very, very uncommon. And we have dual income families like almost across the board. And if that's the case, then both partners need to be in equally, or at least, in a similar ratio of how they're working to how they show up in the home. And it doesn't matter how much money a person's making. Just because you're making more money doesn't mean that you can't wash dishes. And just because your mother used to wash dishes, you don't wash dishes. That's not how it works, really. what happens, what the literature calls women have a double shift, right, where they work a full shift at work, and they come home and they have a full shift to deal with all the domestic stuff. The current research shows that even though men are becoming more, available and more, and are, we call it helping out, because when you talk about women, we don't say that they're helping out around the house, right? Men are helping out, right? It's a very big difference, right? Even though now it's still the same thing.
Or babysitting.
Babysitter, that's the worst. I hate that word for a father. I'm like, oh, you're being a father. Right. So men are, they're getting there, but they're still not. Women are still doing more household domestic work than the men are. This also is true in my one of my research studies that I've done on Orthodox Jewish fathers, and I've asked some of these questions, and on the most part, those are the statistics that even though men are, they know that they should be doing more, and they're trying to do more, it's still not the same amount that women are doing. And I know there are some religious obligations that maybe makes it different, but I think that these conversations really need to happen, because there are a lot of women out there that are struggling with trying to figure out how to balance everything. They're working just as hard, maybe sometimes harder than their male partners, and they don't have enough support at home.
What's getting in the way?
I mean, number one is mentality, or what their beliefs are in who should be doing what, right? That's the gender roles, right? Is it really just the female's role to take care of the kids, or to wash the dishes, or to cook, or to clean?
And that, by the way, is huge, because you practice what was modeled to you. So
Right.
if your father was, didn't wash the dishes,
Right.
that is not a norm for you. And then when you get married, and then that's what's expected. So it takes a period of adjustment. It's possible to adjust it, but also to be able to empathize, to say, like, I can see that this is hard for you. Let's try to find a way to make things work.
Right, exactly. Whether that's hiring domestic help, that could also, work if you're able to afford that.
Like, if you're not able to do ABC, hiring the help, if you have the finances, so that kind of you're helping the family system run smoother.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be like you don't feel the responsibility to put in the effort and the time like your partner is doing.
So we talked about so many different areas in terms of couples, and I feel like we didn't even, maybe we did kind of scratch the surface of couples' work, because there's so many different angles to be successful in a relationship. So as we kind of wrap up this conversation, anyone who's listening to this podcast in a relationship, wants to get into a relationship, having challenges in a relationship, thinking about couples therapy, what are your thoughts about relationships as a whole?
Relationships are a lot of responsibility. They shouldn't be taken lightly. It's another person that you're dealing with, and it's their life just as much as it's your life. And when you engage in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic partner or child, there's responsibility there, and we need to show up and care for that person. And it could be different ways for different types of relationships, but understanding what it is that you mean for that other person and being able to provide whatever it is that you need to provide is important. One thing that I feel like is important across relationships is the idea of validation. That we want to validate the other person, whether it's our child, our partner, our friend, to validate and to show that person that we understand what they're experiencing or what they're going through. Validating really helps the other person feel cared for. And that's what you want to do in relationships. You want to care for the other person. You want to support the other person. Relationships, it's not an easy thing. Relationships are very difficult. It's knowing how to navigate them in a healthy way. That's that will help you make it easier. If you know the skills, and if you're willing to make changes and you're willing to be vulnerable and take risks and be genuine, then you can really succeed in those relationships. Sometimes people need to do some self-reflection and some inner work, personal work, before they can engage in meaningful relationships. There are so many couples out there that have had either difficult childhoods or they have, certain maybe disorders or even just personality issues that they have never dealt with. And they come into relationships and they think that their relationship is going to solve it, or they have to deal with them because this is who I am. You have to deal with it. If you don't like it, leave. Some people say that. That's a very, very ignorant way to approach things, right? We're always evolving as human beings. And if we want to have good relationships, we want to look at ourselves and what is it that we need to maybe change in ourselves, or what can we do differently to make our relationships more successful in the future?
Wow.
Sorry, that was a lot.
Beautifully said. The word flexibility comes up for me.
Oh, yeah. That's a good word.
Being flexible, whether to be able to understand our spouse or being able to be flexible with changing our mindset. Oftentimes when we're raised in certain homes, oftentimes raised in our home as a child, we have this fixed mindset that things have to be a certain way, or just because we lived a certain way for such a long time, it's very difficult to change it. But what I'm hearing from you, based on your experience and the work that you do with couples, there's a way to change that, and it's very possible, even in a really dark situation where one of the spouses cheated, and you feel like all that trust has been broken, all those years that you were together. There is a way to make things work. Another really important area, which I think is a must for us to talk about, is domestic violence in relationships.
Yeah. Domestic violence is something that is not spoken about enough, is very, very hush, like it's very taboo. But the people that experience it suffer greatly and they feel very, very alone. Sometimes people don't even realize that they're experiencing domestic violence, either because they've witnessed it at home and so they think that it's normal in their relationship, or because it's so subtle that they don't realize it. When we talk about domestic violence, it's not just about physical violence. There's emotional, financial, spiritual, anything that somehow, when you take control away from another person, that can constitute as abuse in some way. When you're not allowing that person to have any power or, agency in something, that can constitute as, an abuse. So that's on a very simple level, but something that doesn't, is not spoken about is the physical violence that happens, that still occurs, and sometimes it could just be in the form of yelling and shouting and cursing, and it can be very, very hurtful. It could go both ways: men to women, women to men, men to men, women to women. And it's very important to stand up for yourself. Now, it's very delicate because many times when someone goes, let's say, to get help, they feel like it makes the relationship worse because they're like, oh, the partner could say, why did you tell someone about our relationship? Why did you go say anything? I didn't do anything. Like they become very defensive, and they can make the abuse actually worse. People think like, oh, let's call the police when something happens. Like they hear a neighbor or something, going on, or they hear that they overhear that one person is a domestic violence victim. The problem is when police come, police can't do so much unless a person wants to press charges. If they don't, then getting the police involved can make the other partner really, really upset and make the violence worse. So you have to be so careful in how you navigate it. If there are people that are experiencing domestic violence, there are certain hotlines that they can call, and they should. In the Orthodox Jewish world, OHEL is one of them that helps people who are experiencing domestic violence. Also, we have the Shalom Task Force that also helps people who are experiencing domestic violence. And that could be, again, forms of any type of physical violence. That could be hitting or pushing or slapping or kicking or, using objects, throwing things. People think that if I throw something and it hits the wall, but it doesn't hit a person, that's not a problem. Well, that's a really serious problem because you're trying to threaten, you're trying to show your aggression or your dominance in the situation. And that could be really, really scary for the other person. So that person needs to really control and work on their rage. Again, we talked about finances before, but so financial abuse and not allowing a partner to use money, that is also a real issue. Then we have so emotional abuse. Emotional is also a big problem because either it's manipulation, it could be gaslighting. I know people use the word gaslighting. If people understand it, it's it's when a person makes the other person feel like they're crazy or like they're insane. That like, oh, how did you even hear that? You must be going crazy. That's gaslighting, or So these are not spoken about, and people really need the support. And so, if a person is suffering from one of these things, please reach out. And I know it can feel very painful. It can feel embarrassing. It can feel, very anxiety provoking because you don't know what's going to happen, or I have kids, or I have my stuff, or like where am I going to go, or what am I going to do? But the thing is, you don't deserve to be hurt in this way, and you are not responsible for whatever happened. No one is allowed to abuse another person. So there are people out there that can help. So just ask for help.
I think this is such an important piece that you're bringing up. Also to mention, definitely, I know I hear we're talking from the victim's standpoint. From the aggressor standpoint, also, if you are a person or someone who is losing control and you feel like it's very difficult for you to navigate relationship with your spouse, and sometimes you may feel like you're saying something but they don't get it, and you have a hard time communicating and you lose control, you feel like you have a short fuse and anger is something that is a part of you, there is help out there as well. So on both ends too, to be able to communicate effectively, a lot of the times, I know I'm making a general statement here, but I think it's important to share. oftentimes people will be looked at as an angry person if they hit, if they yell, if they throw things, right? But that can also be because they don't have the specific vocabulary to express the amount of pain that they're holding on to.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially in certain cultures, and because of things that we've seen, we feel like just because we're yelling or getting loud and becoming aggressive and hitting, that's a form that, our spouse or our children will understand. There is another way, and we can figure this out. We can figure out a way to let others know that you are upset, you're disappointed. It's not, I talk a lot about this with my clients, feeling angry is not a problem. It's what we do with that anger that's a problem, right? So
exactly.
if we're angry and we talk about it and we are looking for a solution, that's exactly what we need to do. That anger can actually help us. It's an alarm system that brings our emotion out and it can help us communicate that, but doing it right. Because when we get angry and then we will hit our child or hit our spouse or throw something, the action is not okay.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Exactly right. It's about the specific behaviors, the actions that are the problem. It's not the person. That it's a separate thing. Yeah.
So actually something that I use and something that I suggest to the couples that I work with is a game, right? Let's bring some fun back because this work could be so heavy sometimes.
Wow.
So this is actually called the On Game. It's not sponsored, but I want to share it. This is a game that many times I actually played with even my spouse, right?
Yeah, I played it with mine as well.
And I take this, I've taken it many times on date night, because a lot of the times, especially when you tell couples, go on a date, but don't talk about the kids or don't talk about this, don't talk about, right?
What else?
It's really tough to come up with topics to talk about. So this is such an incredible game where there's level 1 and level 2. And level 1 is more kind of on the surface questions, and level 2 is more in depth. I don't think I ever went over like 10 questions in a time, like on date night, because these are really, they might sound like really simple questions, but there's really, right. So like I'll go over I'll give you an example of what question 1 would look like. Complete the statement. I feel impatient when ... right? And it can be something simple, like I feel impatient when you're on your phone and I'm telling you to get off your phone and pay attention.
Yeah.
That can be an example, right?
Yeah.
Well, who's impatient there? I know. Or level 2 would be, let's see.
Tell me your deepest, darkest secret.
What is something you fear at the present moment?
Oh, that's great.
Right?
Yeah.
And that can kind of take you into a place where, I'm really having a challenging time with finances. I don't know where we're going to, if we're going to make it or...
That invites vulnerability.
Exactly.
And to create connection. No, I think it's a great game and really important topics because, and it's good also for some couples who are... not as, let's say, talkative or don't have deep conversations, or one partner is, closed off or don't know how to express themselves. These can ask thought-provoking questions to help them engage more and to let their partner know more about themselves. One of the most important things in relationships, Gottman says, is understanding each other's love maps. Like, what are the things that are important to your partner? What are the things that they want or need? So many times, especially if we have kids, we lose the big picture, view. Like, what are we here for? What do we want to do? What do we want to do with our lives? And we talk about making dreams come true and, shared values and meaning. And how do we get there? Right? So having these conversations, even while we have kids, we have those responsibilities, is important because, I never knew that you wanted to, own a sports car. Let's figure out how we can make that work. Or I never realized you really wanted to, climb Mount Rushmore. No, Mount Everest. I don't think you climb Mount Rushmore. Maybe you do. Go to Mount Rushmore. You visit it.
Yeah. But I get it. You know, so a lot of the times also life takes over and we forget some of that, our dreams or, things that we wanted to do but never had a chance to do. And then when we talk about it within this, it can look like such a simple game. We can actually achieve these goals by letting our significant other know that, hey, that was once a dream of mine, and maybe we can make this work one day.
Yeah.
So now that this was a game for couples, I have a game for you. Are you ready?
For me. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting game. I don't think I ever used this particular ball in my podcast, but so you're the first one to try it out here.
Okay.
But what I like to do is I'm going to throw this ball to you. You catch the ball, and wherever your thumb lands on, that's the question you read, and then you answer it if you're comfortable. Are you ready?
We should have started. This is an icebreaker.
It is an icebreaker, but you know what? We talked so much about different things to look out for and different skills, but I think it's a good idea to hear a little bit about you. Are you ready?
Okay.
And then you throw it to me, and I'll answer. Good catch.
So
wherever, anytime you want.
Oh, I'm still learning to cope with.
This is your moment to be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's my vulnerable moment. I'm still learning to cope with. Do I want to like rejection? Maybe rejection. That as lots of therapists, we're people pleasers, and we want to be the yes man or yes woman for everything. And if for some reason we're not that for a person, we can feel we get anxious or worried, or like we feel rejected, like, oh, what did I do wrong, or how can I win that person back, or what does that mean about me? But I'm learning to cope with it. That's totally fine. If something about me that you don't like, or that I didn't do enough or couldn't be that person, that's okay.
So somebody who's listening to this and might feel the same way, because that is so normal. As humans, it's so natural for us to just want to be accepted by everyone. And we naturally want everyone to love us and like us.
Right.
But as we grow and do our own inner work, we realize that that's just not possible.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, your turn.
Okay, my turn. Ready? Okay, let's see what this is. Ooh, when feeling low, I'd like to try. So obviously we know I love my animals for sure. We know that. That's a given. But something new. I really actually enjoy swimming.
Oh,
I love that. I feel like when I swim, when my body's completely in the water, I just have the sense of complete peace, and it definitely helps me get out of my low. That's for sure.
So you gotta get an indoor pool for the winter.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, I go to the gym, and in the gym they have a pool. Yeah, they have a pool, and
my gym doesn't. I wish they did.
So this was such a nice treat. It was so nice to be able to have these conversations again. We definitely need a part 2, because this is like we just touched the tip of the iceberg.
With couples, there's so many things.
I have so many notes of how much we had to talk, and I feel like we just went over a few of them, but. If anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they make that happen?
Sure. So they can visit my website if they want. That's drmoshemoeller.com. Mm-hmm. So drmoshemoeller.com. Or they can, and there they could submit contact me, or they can email me if they want.
And you're on Instagram also.
I'm on Instagram. Oh, yeah, my hashtag is Moshe Moeller, PhD. So my full name. We'll put that in the link definitely. Or something. They could contact me that way, or they can email me if they want, which is also Moshe Moeller, PhD @gmail.com.
Sounds good. This was a real treat. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me. This
I wish you all the
fun.
best with all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right.
Too.